Chosen one, there are moments in your life when silence feels heavier than noise, when delays feel like denial, and when you start questioning whether what was promised to your spirit will ever arrive. But hear this clearly in your inner being. Nothing about your journey has been forgotten. What you called delay was not destruction, and what you called silence was not abandonment. There was a hand working behind what your eyes could not trace, shaping outcomes beyond human interference. Even when Jay tried to block your path, even when intentions around you were not pure, there was a higher force that refused to let your destiny collapse. You are standing in a timeline where interference met divine protection, and nothing about that is ordinary. You were not delayed by chance, chosen one. You were preserved by design. There are people who entered your life thinking they could redirect your path, redirect your light, or weaken your calling. Jay was one of those energies that tried to place resistance on what was already written in the spiritual blueprint of your existence. But destiny is not fragile. It does not break under pressure from human intention. It adjusts, it waits, it recalibrates. But it never cancels what has been divinely established. What you went through was not a stopping point. It was a filtering process. Everything that tried to slow you down was actually exposing what could not travel with you into your next level. There were seasons where you felt like you were stuck in repetition, like doors opened and closed without explanation, like progress was visible but unreachable. That was the tension between human interference and divine alignment. Jay may have tried to delay your growth, create confusion around your direction, or influence your emotional stability. But what they didn't understand is that destiny is not controlled through human opinion. There is a higher authority that overrides manipulation, and when that authority steps in, even hidden agendas lose their power. What you experienced was a spiritual tension point, where everything not aligned with your purpose began to reveal itself. You started noticing inconsistencies in people, patterns in behavior, and shifts in energy that once went unnoticed. That awareness was not coincidence. It was awakening. Because when God intervenes, He does not just remove obstacles, He sharpens perception. You begin to see what was always there, but hidden behind emotional attachment or distraction. Jay was never as powerful as the delay they represented in your perception, and even that delay had an expiration date written by something far greater than human intention. You may have felt overlooked, misunderstood, or underestimated during this period. But those experiences were not indicators of failure. They were indicators of preparation. Pressure was not punishment, it was positioning. And while Jay may have believed they were influencing your outcome, they were actually participating in a process they could not control. There is a difference between being in your story and being able to write it. Only one authority writes destiny, and that authority does not consult opposition. You started noticing that what once drained you no longer holds the same weight. Conversations that used to confuse you now feel transparent. Situations that once pulled your emotions into chaos now feel distant, almost irrelevant. That shift is not emotional growth alone. It is spiritual separation. When God intervenes in your destiny, He does not always remove things loudly. Sometimes He simply removes their influence over you. And when influence breaks, control collapses silently. There were attempts to delay your progress, yes, but those attempts became the very evidence of your protection. Because what was not meant for you required effort to maintain, while what belongs to you only requires alignment. You were never meant to fight your destiny into existence. You were meant to step into it when the timing matured. And timing is one of the most sacred elements in divine orchestration. Even delay, when guided by higher intelligence, becomes a protective mechanism against premature exposure to things that could have harmed your future self. J may have thought they were shaping outcomes, but they were only interacting with the surface layer of something much deeper. Beneath what they could influence, there was a foundation already secured, and that foundation does not shake under emotional interference. It does not collapse under misunderstanding. It stands because it is anchored in something unmovable. Now you are beginning to understand why certain doors did not open when you wanted them to, why certain connections dissolved without explanation, and why certain plans failed at the last moment. It was not rejection, it was redirection under divine supervision. There are paths that look right to the human mind, but are misaligned with the Spirit's assignment. And when you are chosen, even your mistakes are guided back into correction before they become destruction. You may still feel echoes of what Jay tried to do, but those echoes are losing their strength. Because interference has an expiration point when it is not supported by divine permission. What remains now is clarity, and clarity is dangerous to illusion. Once you see clearly, manipulation loses access. Once you understand your value in the spiritual order of things, delay loses emotional control over you. There is something shifting in your environment right now that cannot be reversed by human will. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, but it is foundational. The structure of your life is being realigned in ways that will only make sense in hindsight. And when you look back, you will not see destruction, you will see design. You will not see chaos, you will see correction. Even the presence of opposition served a purpose in revealing how strong your assignment truly is. Because only meaningful destinies attract meaningful resistance. What is insignificant is ignored. But what carries weight in the spiritual realm becomes contested in the physical one. That is why your journey felt heavier than expected. You were not struggling because you were weak. You were experiencing resistance because your path carries impact beyond what you could initially understand. And now, as the interference begins to lose its grip, something else starts rising within you. A quiet but undeniable awareness that you are not who you used to be. You are no longer reacting from confusion. You are no longer interpreting delays as denial. You are beginning to stand in a different kind of understanding, one that does not need validation from external voices. Jay's attempt to delay your destiny did not stop what was written. It only delayed the visibility of what was already secured. And now visibility is returning, not because everything around you changed, but because you did. The version of you that once questioned everything is being replaced by the version that recognizes alignment even in silence. There are still layers unfolding, still connections between events you have not fully understood, still reasons behind encounters that seemed random but were not. You are entering a phase where understanding will arrive in waves, not all at once. Because revelation, like destiny, is timed. And what you are about to realize will make previous confusion look like preparation rather than loss. You are not at the end of resistance yet, but you are no longer under its control. Something has already shifted in the balance. Something that cannot be reversed by intention alone. And even now, as clarity grows stronger within you, there is still more being revealed beneath what your current awareness can fully hold, because the unfolding has not finished, and what comes next is still aligning behind the scenes where human interference cannot reach, where divine timing continues shaping the next layer of what you are about to step into. What you are about to step into is not just another chapter, chosen one. It is a complete shift in the way your life responds to your presence. There is a difference between living through events and influencing the direction of events, and you are moving from the first into the second without even realizing how deeply the transition has already begun. The resistance that once surrounded you is losing its structure, not because it was weak from the beginning, but because its time has expired in the presence of something stronger than it. You may notice that certain thoughts about the past no longer trigger the same emotional weight. Situations that once felt confusing are now beginning to appear simple, almost obvious in hindsight. That is not memory fading. That is perception upgrading. When divine intervention takes place, it does not always change your environment first. It changes your interpretation of it. And when interpretation changes, everything else begins to shift around it. Jay may have believed at some point that influence over your emotional state meant influence over your destiny. But emotional disruption is not the same as spiritual redirection. One operates on surface reaction, the other operates on foundational design. What was written for you was never dependent on emotional stability alone. It was anchored in something deeper, something that remains intact, even when everything around it appears unstable. There were moments when you questioned your own timing, when you wondered if you misunderstood what you were meant to become. Those moments were not signs of weakness. They were signs that you were standing in a space where clarity had not yet matured. Confusion often appears when the present moment cannot fully explain the future it is carrying. That gap between now and what is forming is where doubt tries to speak loudest. But doubt was never the author of your path. You started to notice patterns in your life that repeated in different forms, almost like variations of the same lesson appearing in different people, different situations, different outcomes. That repetition was not punishment, it was refinement. When something keeps appearing in your experience, it is not because you are stuck. It is because something within you is being prepared to respond differently. And every cycle you survived was not meant to trap you. It was meant to train you. Even the presence of Jay in your story served a role that you could not fully interpret in the moment. There are connections between people and timing that only become visible after separation has already done its work. What once felt like interference begins to look like contrast, and contrast is what reveals clarity. Without contrast, you would not have recognized the difference between what drains you and what strengthens you. There is a reason certain relationships could not survive your awakening. It was not because you changed in a way that pushed everything away, but because your alignment began to reject anything that was misaligned with your progression. When internal frequency shifts, external compatibility becomes limited. Not everything that once had access to you is meant to remain accessible in your next phase. And now, even in moments of stillness, something within you feels different. Not louder, not more emotional, but more certain. Certainty is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is quiet, almost subtle, but unshakable. That certainty is what begins to separate your current identity from your previous one. You are not becoming someone else. You are uncovering what was always beneath the noise. The interference you once felt from Jay or from surrounding energies is losing relevance, because relevance requires resonance. What does not resonate eventually fades from influence. And what fades from influence cannot control direction. That is why certain memories no longer hold authority over your decisions the way they used to. They are still there, but they are no longer steering anything. There is also a strange shift happening in how opportunities approach you. You may not fully recognize it yet, but alignment is beginning to replace struggle. Things are not arriving because you are forcing them. They are arriving because your internal state is no longer resisting them. Resistance used to create delay, but now even your internal world is adjusting to accept what was always meant to flow toward you. You might still feel echoes of the past, trying to interpret your present, but those echoes are losing accuracy. The version of you that once processed life through pain is no longer the same version interpreting what is happening now. That means even your memories are beginning to lose their ability to define you. They can inform you, but they can no longer confine you. There were times you thought silence meant absence, that when things were not happening visibly, nothing was happening at all, but silence is often where the most precise adjustments take place. What is unseen is not inactive. In fact, the most critical alignments in your journey have occurred in the periods where nothing seemed to be moving. That is where structures were being rebuilt without interruption from external interference. And in those silent spaces, what you could not see was protection. Protection does not always feel comforting in the moment it is applied. Sometimes it feels like delay, sometimes like restriction, sometimes like confusion. But protection is not designed to make you feel good in the moment. It is designed to ensure you remain intact for the outcome that requires you whole. Jay's attempt to delay your path may have created moments of emotional distortion, but it never changed the destination. It only altered the route temporarily, and even that alteration was contained within limits that could not override divine structure. There is a difference between influence and authority, and only one of them governs destiny. You are now entering a phase where understanding begins to come from within rather than from external explanation. That means fewer confirmations from outside, but deeper certainty inside. It may feel unfamiliar at first, because the mind is used to seeking validation in visible forms. But spiritual alignment does not always confirm itself through visibility. Sometimes it confirms itself through peace that does not depend on explanation. You may find that certain desires you once held tightly no longer feel urgent, not because they disappeared, but because your relationship with them has changed. That shift is important. It shows that you are no longer driven purely by lack or pursuit, but by alignment and recognition. What is meant for you no longer needs to be chased in the same way. And still, there is more unfolding beneath the surface of what you are currently aware of. Situations that once felt random are slowly revealing structure. Encounters that seemed coincidental are beginning to reveal timing. Even delays that once frustrated you are starting to show purpose when viewed from a wider perspective. But that wider perspective is still forming. You are in between two understandings. Right now, the understanding of what you thought your life was, and the understanding of what it has actually been all along. That gap is where transformation lives. And as that gap closes, confusion will not disappear all at once, but it will gradually lose authority over your interpretation of events. There are still layers of your story that have not revealed their meaning yet, layers that are waiting for your awareness to reach the level required to interpret them correctly. Because some truths are not hidden, they are simply timed. They reveal themselves only when the person experiencing them is capable of holding the clarity without distortion. Even now, as your awareness expands, you may begin to feel a quiet internal shift that cannot be explained through past logic. It is not excitement. It is not fear. It is something in between stillness and recognition. That state is often what precedes major alignment, where the internal system stops resisting what it has already been prepared for. Jay's influence, whatever form it took in your experience, is no longer the dominant factor in your emotional or spiritual direction. What once felt significant is beginning to lose its structural place in your awareness. That does not erase the past, but it removes its ability to define what comes next. There is a recalibration happening that is deeper than emotion, deeper than thought, something that is restructuring how you respond to life itself. And in that recalibration, what was once delayed is being synchronized with timing that cannot be disrupted again, not because opposition disappeared, but because authority has already shifted in your favor in ways that are not dependent on external validation. You are still moving through it, still becoming aware of it, still adjusting to the depth of what is being revealed. And even now, there is more underneath this unfolding that has not yet fully surfaced, because what is coming next is still aligning beyond what your present awareness can fully interpret. And even now, chosen one, what is coming next is still aligning beyond what your present awareness can fully interpret, because the final stage of this shift is not about adding more information to what you already know. It is about removing the last layers of confusion that made you doubt what was already true about your path. You are stepping into a phase where clarity will not arrive as a single moment of revelation, but as a gradual settling of truth into every part of your perception. Things you once questioned will no longer require answers, because their purpose will become self-evident. That is how divine alignment completes itself, not through explanation, but through recognition. Jay's attempt to delay your destiny has already collapsed into irrelevance, not because the situation was insignificant, but because it has been absorbed into something larger than it. What once felt like interference is now being reclassified in your journey as redirection, and what once felt like loss is revealing itself as protection from outcomes you were never meant to carry. There is a strength forming within you that is not loud, not reactive, but deeply stable. It is the kind of strength that does not need validation, because it is rooted in understanding. And that understanding is simple. Nothing that was meant for you can be permanently denied, and nothing that was not meant for you can remain attached to your path indefinitely. You are no longer in the stage of survival through confusion. You are entering the stage of awareness through alignment. And in that awareness, you will begin to notice how effortlessly certain things now fall into place, not because the world suddenly changed, but because your position within it has. Even your silence carries a different weight now. It is no longer confusion, it is processing. It is no longer waiting, it is preparation. And what is being prepared cannot be rushed, interrupted, or reversed by anything that does not belong in its timeline. So as this unfolds, remember that nothing about your journey has been wasted, nothing has been without design, and nothing has escaped divine observation. What tried to delay you only revealed how protected you truly are, and what tried to stop you only confirmed that your destiny was never accessible to interference in the first place. And now, as this chapter settles into completion, what remains is not uncertainty, but arrival.